Code 3 Americans, welcome back. Hope everyone's still doing well. Wanted to go over another video, or I'm sorry, do another video and go over another news story. That'd be a better way of saying that. About it's headlined uh, Saudi Arabia considers accepting yuan instead of dollars for Chinese oil sales. I want to talk about why that's a big deal. So don't tune out if you haven't money invested anywhere or you're worried about your financial freedoms and so forth. You should pay attention to things like these. These aren't just little news stories. Unfortunately, most people just pay attention to the Dow Jones Industrial Average, and they think that's watching economics. And I hope that's not you. The whole purpose of our community is to help share some news stories, help share information. We travel around a lot, or I do especially, and spend a lot of make a lot of investments in time and money in getting plugged into networks and information to where we can bring that back and share it with folks in our community. That's why there's a call to action there to join our community on the screen. It's not to sell you anything, it's to give you a place to go for the folks that don't have the time or resources to go. And resources can be just time to go and study these things. So we just want to call out certain things that maybe you should be paying attention to so that you have a little bit of a leg up over, say, your neighbor. Because if you just watch the Dow Jones Industrial Average, that's the end result of all the precursors. Okay. So once you see it go up or down, that's just a historical representation of what's going on. But there's certain clues on not just what these videos aren't designed just to illustrate what the stock market may or may not do, is to illustrate at the macro level where things may be moving in the game of economics and investing and wealth building and what may cause you threats. So, real quick, before we get real deep into this article, I want to talk about why this is kind of an issue. If you think about it, the United States is the world's reserve currency. I'm sorry, the dollar is, excuse me, not the United States. Same thing. Dollar is the world reserve currency. So we are able to print this money and not really be harmed as bad as we dilute the value of the currency as other countries may, because we control so much in a global economy by the fact that all the trades or most of the trades are settled in dollars. That's what it means essentially by world's reserve currency. Well, that gives us a huge advantage. I mean, the whole system then becomes inflation based. So you could go buy a house in America on 30-year debt, and unless something really goes to crap in your market, you can pretty much sit there and your house will ride inflation. And then however many years later, you've got 600,000 more dollars in purchasing power, and we all look like a genius. The reality is you can't do that in the rest of the world. So many countries have to worry about what the dollar is doing and their own currencies. And if the countries start to mismanage that relationship and start to create too much of their own currency, or we start to behave a certain way with our currency and it dilutes them, then inflation starts to really kill them, and they can really face some troubles. They can't just go pay 3% on a house and then look smart in 6 years. And that without really to really explain that, we'd kind of have to get a little further out into the weeds. But I just want you to understand that having the world's reserve currency is a big, 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 big deal. So here, we talk about the dollar as the world's reserve currency, but you also got to look back at history, and there's a thing that's often referred to as the petrodollar. The petrodollar is simply basically the dollars it trades in energy, or in particular oil. So what's happening is, and these conversations have been going on for a little while, but it talks about Saudi Arabia is in active talks with Beijing to price some of its oil sales in China yuan. People familiar with the matter said a move that would dent the U.S. dollar's dominance of the global petroleum market and mark another shift by the world's top crude exporter toward Asia. So that's been on and off, as they point out here. However, the Saudis have been grown increasingly unhappy with the decades-old U.S. security commitments to defend the kingdom, the people said. All right, so back when the dollar went off the gold standard in 1971, a few years later, I believe it was 1974, the United States entered into an agreement with Saudi Arabia that we would defend them if they agreed to trade oil in dollars. Why? Why would we do that? Well, If we could control the most important resource in the world, and through the fact that it would all be traded in US dollars, and we create or we control the creation of dollars, that's a huge leg up, and that became known as the petrodollar. So instead of kind of a gold standard, a dollars backed by gold, it was kind of dollars backed by oil. And we had a military might to back the Saudis. Well, if you look here, the Saudis are unhappy with how we handled, they're talking about the Yemen civil war, the Biden administration's attempt to strike a deal with Iran over its nuclear program. Why do you think the Saudis don't want Iran to have nuclear weapons? Well, that's pretty obvious. Pretty close neighbor for that. And the Saudi officials have said they were shocked by the precipitous U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan last year. Frankly, I don't usually talk about this much, but I'm a veteran and I was over in that part of the world. I was in Uzbekistan many years ago, almost 20 years ago now. And when I watch that on TV, I don't usually get into politics and the news, but frankly, I was embarrassed. I was absolutely just embarrassed by that. And if you don't think the rest of the world took note of what that looked like, and then the Saudis are probably thinking, well, geez, we had made this agreement that we would give the Americans a huge leg up on trading our oil in dollars. Well, geez, that looked like a faboncle. And how well are they going to defend us? There's already been some rubs in how we're doing that. So they may be exploring some other options. We got to remember other people in the world get a vote too. They get an opinion and they control a tremendous amount of resources. So I'm not trying to be doom and gloom. I'm just saying that, okay, where's the puck going? How's the game shifting? There seems to be a little bit more narrative around the Saudis being unhappy. Then you start to overlay that and just go look. I think it was in George Gammon just did a video on this actually, but if you were paying attention back then, I think it was like around 2014 when Russia did their first little deal with the Crimea Peninsula, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. And when they annexed that and they got hit with some sanctions, suddenly they started stockpiling gold. China did the same thing starting at the same time. And it just went, I mean, they just started stockpiling a ton of gold quickly. And you have to ask why? Well, the narrative then for way deep in the financial news that never hit mainstream news was, are this Chinese and Russians trying to position themselves, hedge themselves against the effects of the dollar and maybe our global economic controls and acquire more gold? And without getting into the weeds where they could be taking that, go watch George's video on that. But it's kind of interesting. But my point is, it all produces risk to Americans. Why do you care about this? Well, there's a high probability that most of the people watching this video, their wealth is denominated in dollars. If the dollar loses its global reserve status or even gets diminished significantly, suddenly a huge amount of our wealth could be wiped out instantaneously because the dollar's just debt. It's an IOU. People think it's money. It's not. It's a currency. Look at it. It says Federal Reserve Note. Pull it out of your wallet right now. Look at it. It says Federal Reserve Note. What's a note? A note is debt. And it's a debt. It's an IOU. Well, if that all starts to become worth less and less in the eyes of different people, then that debt is not as sound. So that's probably a bad way of explaining it, but essentially, if the dollar were to be diminished in its reserve status, that's a problem for people denominated entirely in dollars in their wealth, and that includes in stock market. This is why, again, we're pushing those videos on the fatal funnel. What is a fatal funnel? How does, I'm kind of pulling that from my SWAT experience, but it's the same thing, and how the monetary system has single point controls over people, and then the benefits of decentralized assets, not to be confused with just diversified assets. Because when you hear diversified, you think stocks, mutual funds, bonds, I should be spread around. That's not the case. You're probably listen to Jim Rickards. You're diversified in one thing, the stock market. That's not what I'm talking about. So what we're trying to get across here is really be paying attention to where things could be going, because if we handle it like most people do the news with the Dow Jones average, if we're just looking for, all of a sudden the oil's being traded different, or all of a sudden something's happening in Asia and how we trade gold or gold back currencies or whatever the case may be, it could be too late. That's why we're pushing folks to join a community, have a place to go, get plugged in information, make sure you're liking the videos, make sure you're telling friends about them, make sure you're sharing them. We're just out here sharing information that if you just take a little bit of time to watch it, you'll see the news stories differently. We have certainly learned to look at a lot of this stuff differently through a number of the folks we get around, but not everybody has the time to travel all those places, and it is a lot of work and a lot of investment. And if we can come back and condense that down to help you folks and give you a place to go to plug into the information so you can make your own assessment. We're not telling you what to do. We're sharing ideas and information so that you can make an assessment of what makes sense for you and your family, and then frankly for generations to come. Then overlay that with we're creating meetup opportunities where people could come together on Zoom and talk about this type of information, have a platform where we can share and collaborate ideas. How awesome is that? That really gives us a leg up. So make sure you're engaging with the community, share it with a friend, like the video, help us get this stuff going. Send an email to community@code3assets.com. If you're not already on our newsletter list, you'll get a lot of this stuff in newsletter format, usually only once or twice a week. Um, or if you want to participate in our meetup coming up here soon, depending on when you watch this, we got one on the 22nd of March. If you're watching after that, you could still send an email to meetup@code3assets.com. We'll put you on the list for a future one. Anyway, hope everyone's doing well. And if you've seen our other videos, we bring in the SWAT background just because that's who I am. But when we all get ready in a known area being here, and we're ready to go make some moves and execute on whatever the plan may be in a SWAT community, last person sees everything's ready to go, we get a teams up, thumbs up, we execute the plan. Stay safe.